Yahoo Fantasy Auto Racing Week 18. We're going to take a look at the Tucson Racing Group, see how things shook out after the Coke 0400 from the Daytona International Speedway this Saturday night. A wild race to say the least. The winner this week, Kevin Harvick, picking up his second victory of the season, rounding out the top five, Kasey Kahne, Jeff Gordon, Dale Earnhardt Jr., and Jeff Burton. So the top five, many of those names that you would expect to see up at the top, but beyond that, things went crazy this week. Overall point standings, Kevin Harvick actually extended his points lead to 212 now over Jeff Gordon, who leaps into second place, 212 back, and third is Jimmie Johnson, 225 points out. Let's take a look at the race notes, talk about what happened in the actual race to explain what happened and how Kevin Harvick wound up getting where he got with the victory. Qualifying was actually rained out, so the field was started on the owner's point system. That meant Kevin Harvick started on the pole. There was a 1.5 hour delay by rain as well, so this race started after the sun had finally gone down in Daytona. Very unusual names dominated the early portions of the race. You saw Elliott Sadler, Sam Hornish Jr., Brad Keselowski, and a couple others running towards the front rather consistently on this evening. So some very unusual names surfaced at the top, made things really interesting up front all night long. The big controversial accident of the race was Kyle Busch being wrecked by Juan Pablo Montoya on the backstretch. The cars are supposed to be going straight on a backstretch, but these two wound up hooking together, and Kyle Busch was taken out. He would wind up coming home in 40th. Another incident, David Ragan actually spun all by himself in turn 3. Later on in the race, this collected two highly touted contenders, Martin Truex and Jamie McMurray. Both teams had cars that could have won the race, but instead a 3-car pileup ended their day. The big one, though, actually happened this race. A 20-car pileup with about 15 laps to go took out almost every name you can think of. Left about a dozen good cars running on the racetrack. Anybody else either parked their car after the wreck because they had too much damage or wound up limping around trying to barely complete some laps. This led to a wild shootout for the last dozen laps or so. It also saw Kurt Busch and Sam Hornish, two cars that ran up front all evening, get together real late, setting up an overtime incident where Clint Boyer led the field going into overtime but got punted on the final lap on the backstretch. So he would be a non-factor coming to the line, and Kevin Harvick was able to survive the melee. About 10 good cars were on the track by the end of this thing, and Harvick was last man standing, that's for sure. One interesting note in the Yahoo Fantasy group, of the top 20 drivers in the finish who finished the race, 9 of those were off of the C list this week. Reed Sorensen and Scott Speed both picked up top 10s for Team Red Bull. Robbie Gordon, Mike Bliss, Steve Park, Kevin Conway, Bobby Labonte, Paul Menard, and J.J. Yaley all picked up top 20 finishes this week. There were only 5 A-listers that actually managed a top 20 finish, one of those being Greg Biffle in 20th. So the C-list represented big time on Saturday night, especially with the major pileup taking out most of the race's main contenders. In the Tucson Racing group, we saw a first-time winner. First time ever for Greek Thunder. Picked up the victory this week because of all the action and all the melee. Greek Thunder was able to drive 4 drivers through the accidents and pick up 338 points and really close the gap between him and the top 5 teams. Thunder had 3 drivers in the top 6. Had first and second place Kevin Harvick and Kasey Kahne. Had Carl Edwards in 6th out of Group A, and Sam Hornish, despite being in a wreck and throwing away a top 10 finish, Hornish was still able to limp around for 21st because so many cars were already out by that point. Second this week, Lightning McQueen with 304 points, just 34 points off of first place this week. Lightning McQueen had 2 drivers in the top 5, including winner Kevin Harvick. Had Paul Menard in 18th, and out of Group A, Denny Hamlin had a disappointing 24th, but again, beat a lot of contenders because of the big wreck. Third this week, Hulk Smash with just 248 points, 90 points out of first, but still managed a third place this week. 1 driver in the top 15, that was Jeff Gordon in third. Smash was then saddled by Clint Boyer, who got punted on that last lap, wound up dropping from about 4th to 17th when it was all said and done. Paul Menard was 18th, and Marcus Ambrose was 32nd this week. 4th, Team Edwards, 230 points, 108 points out of 1st, but still a top 5 this week. Had 2 drivers in the top 10, including 2nd place Casey Kane and Kurt Busch in 7th, but was brought down by Joey Logano, who was taken out in the big wreck and finished 29th, and AJ Allmendinger, who was 36th after a disappointing run. He was actually running in the top 15 when he wound up hitting the wall and picking up some damage. Was not competitive from that point on. Rounding out the top 5 and barely this week was High, Wide, and Handsome with just 176 points. Missed out on 1st by over 150 points, 162 points out of 1st place to be exact this week. Lost a ton of ground to Lightning McQueen as well. Handsome only managed 1 driver in the top 20. That was Earnhardt Jr. in 4th. Had Tony Stewart 25th, Jamie McMurray 39th, and Regan Smith 33rd. Stewart and Smith were both collected in the big one, and McMurray was taken out prior to that. So very disappointing run for High, Wide, and Handsome, but still managed a top 5. Then a strange situation. 6th this week was Woe, a left turn with just 164 points. That's because Woe actually didn't start any eligible driver in Group A, and one of the Group B drivers was no longer eligible, so no points out of 2 drivers, but got a 5th and a 10th from Jeff Burton and Scott Speed. That was enough for 164 points. Missed out on 1st by 174 points, but still beat a team that had 4 active drivers this week. That was 7th place. The Wall Always Wins. Only 150 points this week. Was the victim of a lot of messes. Clint Boyer was the best driver on this team. Because he got spun on that last lap, he wound up 17th, but was still the best driver that the Wall started this week, finishing 188 points off the pace. Had Ryan Newman and Kyle Busch and AJ Allmendinger rounding out that team. 8th this week, just 1 driver collecting points for Oh No, a blowout right now. That was Paul Menard in 18th. Only scored 56 points this week. And 9th was Kane Rules, yet again scoring no points. In the overall standings, High, Wide, and Handsome's gigantic lead was basically cut in half, as Lightning McQueen's now just 134 out of 1st. And as we saw this week, Handsome lost about 130 points to Lightning McQueen, so that could pretty much be made up in one race if things don't go well for Handsome. So things are really tightening up at the top of the standings. 3rd is Hulk Smash, just 170 out of 1st place, so 2nd and 3rd are still very close. Then we have a very tight battle between 4th, 5th, and 6th. The Wall Always Wins is now 458 points out of 1st. Team Edwards had a decent showing this week, definitely made up a lot of ground on the wall, is now just 520 points out of 1st, but just 62 points out of 4th. And then Greek Thunder, the big winner this week, only now 603 points out of 1st place, but is now just 83 points out of 5th. So Greek is definitely knocking on the door and has definitely made up for that one missed race at the beginning of the season. Rounding out the field, you've got Oh No, a blowout, over 1,000 points back. Just barely ahead of Woe, a left turn, who's also over 1,000 points out, and then Kane Rules is 2,772 points out of 1st. Next week is the LifeLock.com 400 from the Chicagoland Speedway. Again, we're going to be Saturday night racing in Chicago on the 1.5 mile track under the lights Saturday night. Your pool of drivers is going to lock Friday at 2 a.m. and the starters are going to lock Saturday at 4:41 p.m. So we'll hope to see you back for Week 19 action next Saturday night under the lights at Chicagoland.